32 years ago, Kees Beyers saw an opportunity to turn his passion into a business. Now he's one of the largest luxury chocolate brands in South Africa. Beyers Chocolates makes hundreds of millions in revenue each year and doesn't look like the economy to be slowing down. Our reporter, Kopano Gumbi, sat down to find out what makes the man tick.
It is a real-life Charlie and the Chocolate Factory right here in Kempton Park in Johannesburg. Over 700,000 pieces of chocolate move through this factory store, and we got to sit down with the man behind it, Mr. Kees Beyers, to get a bite out of his sweet life. 1987, this factory store opens, or it wasn't in this specific location, was it?
It wasn't in this building. No, we actually started in Bramley View. That was my first premises. My first premises was a 40 square meter premises in Bramley View. That's where I started at in South Africa.
How many years did it take for you to go from 40 square meters to 7,000 square meters?
We've actually got 14,000 square meters in total. So it took us, in the 40 square meter building, I was in for about a year. And then I rented a 300 square meter building, and I was in there for about 3 years. Maybe even 4 years. I was in there for 4 years, and then I moved to Spartan. That's when we bought our first premises actually, and that was a 2,200 square meter building, and we filled half of it, not even half of it, a quarter of it probably, and then we sort of grew, and it just sort of grew from there. So
you have turned your love of confectionery making into a business. How did you do it?
So my background is I grew up in Belgium, and I knew from a young age what I wanted to do actually. Actually, my mom, I went on a week's holiday with my mom recently, and she told me the story when I was a kid, and I was like 9 years, 10 years old. I would stop at pastry shops. I would stop at the shop and actually look at the cakes and admire the cakes and look at the pastries basically. And I really loved that. And when I was about 12 years of age, I announced at home that I wanted to go to confectionery school. So we have a different school system in Belgium. You can go to a trade school from the age of 12, and that's basically what I did in Antwerp, Belgium. So I studied confectionery. I went to confectionery school for 5 years. Then I did my national service. Then I came to South Africa. I worked as a pastry chef for 2.5 years, but I always had this desire to own my own business. So initially I actually wanted to start a bakery. That was the first thing, but I couldn't bring the money together. I couldn't raise enough capital to actually start a bakery. So I started chocolates very, very small scale. I was still working at the business where I was working at the airport, and then I was working out of these 40 square meter premises, and I was doing so I was working at the airline business. I was working from 7 to 3:30. I got in my car, drove to the premises, and then I started there at around 4 o'clock. And I worked till about 11, 11:30 every day. And that was my routine for about 6 months. And after 6 months, I had a few clients that I could then actually start running the business with. And I started off with hotels, restaurants, basically just hospitality. And then about 2 years later, we sort of started then we started supplying supermarkets. And I always believe you have to have a love of what you do. And I really love what I do. I love the products we make. I do have a passion for it, yeah.
Let's talk about some of the products. How many pieces of chocolate come out of your factory every day?
Out of our factory, I'd have to think about that, but it's I think if I'm just trying to calculate it in my head now, but probably in the region, in terms of individual pieces of chocolate per week, probably about 700,000. That's what we produce on a weekly basis. So but we're still very artisanal. People think, we are quite a large factory. I mean, we employ lots of people, but a lot of the processes we do are still done by hand. There's still hand placement happening on product. There's still a lot of hand finishing. There's still a lot of things we do by hand. So it's still, although we do large volumes of chocolate, we sell large volumes of chocolate, it's still, when you walk into the factory, it's still quite an artisanal type of setup that we actually do.
You identified a gap in the market with chocolate in South Africa because...
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a gap. It's just something that I love doing. I suppose it is a bit of a gap because there aren't many people that do what I do in South Africa. And I think the reason for that is that there is no schooling for it. There's still to this day, there isn't actually a real confectionery school. There are confectionery courses, and we link to some of them, to some of the schools. We sponsor some of the schools with a bit of chocolate, and we put some of their students through our factory to give them some training and so on. But it's not the comprehensive confectionery training that you actually get in Europe. As I said, I went to confectionery school for 5 years. South Africa, they do confectionery courses. It's 6 months, it's a year. It's obviously it's a start. It's a basis to start off, but it's not seen. It's not seen as a real career in South Africa. I actually think that people in South Africa, they look down on people that have a trade. I believe you're a good tradesman, whether you're a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter or a confectioner or a chef. There's value in that. And when you look at Europe and you look at the successful economies in Europe, especially Germany, tradesmen are highly, highly valued in Germany. And I think it's part of their success. Even in America, tradesmen are very highly valued. In South Africa, people look down on it. Everyone's on about higher education. Everyone wants a university degree. Obviously, there's a place for that. But a country needs tradesmen. And I'm all for that, actually. And I think that's something that I think youth should be told. There's nothing wrong with doing a trade and being good at your trade. And if you're good at your trade and if you love what you do, and if you want then to start your own business and do it, I believe you can be successful in pretty much any trade that you actually choose in South Africa. Because I think there's a real shortage of qualified tradespeople in South Africa on all levels, not just confectionery, but on all levels, actually.
And in the confectionery business, I mean, how long did it take until you started to feel competition from the likes of Lindt or any of these other brands?
So our competition really are all the imports, because there's quite a few smaller artisanal chocolate manufacturers in South Africa, and some are really good. Some are really good, and I think it's good for the industry. I think it's educating people about chocolate. There's a whole bean to bar movement that's happening, which I really like. There is all that, but I don't really see them as competition, because we'd be a lot more price competitive than that. But our competition is really all the imports, and I don't know if you know this, but all chocolate imported in South Africa is duty free. There is no duty on it. So sweets are protected. So like jelly sweets, there is a duty. All finished chocolate products coming into South Africa are actually duty free. So that does hamper us to some degree, but I think it's so your question was, when did we start feeling competition? I think probably only in the last 10 years, because I think before that we were very much under the radar. We were relatively unknown. We were doing very well in the hospitality. We were doing a lot of house brand, and then 10 years ago we launched our own brand, which is probably today the fastest growing part of our business. So putting fair bit of focus on that, and obviously once you have a brand out there, once you're on shelf, people start to notice you. So I think, to answer your question, probably in the last 10 years, yeah.
And other than competition, there have been market forces that haven't always worked in your favor as well. The economy's taken quite a knock in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So the economy obviously is not doing well. Increases of raw materials, dairy has gone up quite dramatically in South Africa, and also the rand weakness. So a lot of our ingredients for chocolate are imported. There's cocoa mass, there's cocoa butter. They're all imported ingredients. Also, there's certain finished chocolate that we import, but in bulk, and all that. So we depend a lot on the rand euro exchange rate. I mean, I looked this morning. It's 17 to the rand. The rand euro is 17 rand to 1 euro this morning. I mean, 2 months ago it was 15.50. So it makes life very difficult. And obviously, I think also the type of clientele that buy the sort of chocolates that we actually sell. I think the man in the street is getting poorer in South Africa. The middle class, I think, is getting poorer, and I can see it. I can feel it myself. I mean, I feel in my personal capacity, I had more money to spend 3 years ago than what I have today. Things have just gotten a lot more expensive. Everything, electricity, petrol, groceries, everything's just going up, and I feel the increases that people are getting, the annual increases, are not quite keeping up with the increase of the actual cost of living. That's what I feel. So it is tough out there. Definitely is tough out there.
So not only do you have imports that are duty-free, you have an economy that's declining, but then you have a government that's now trying to introduce a sugar tax, which may not impact you directly right now, but it does change people's palates, I assume.
I think, look, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think people do need to eat healthy. And I always advocate whenever we talk chocolate, sometimes we get schools coming to the factory, and I will always say to kids, you know, chocolate's not a meal replacement. It's an indulgence, it's a treat, and I'd rather have people eat less chocolate, but buy good quality, than consuming masses of chocolate and an actual poor quality. But at the end of the day, chocolate, you know, it is an indulgence, and obviously we're very slanted towards the season. So this factory gets incredibly busy around Christmas, Valentine's, and Easter. So Easter, we do Easter bunnies, Easter eggs, and that's when people eat chocolate. That's when all the diets go out the window. But it's really, you know, and I say it to my kids as well. I have 3 kids myself, and I say to them as well, you know, we always have chocolate in the house. They can take chocolate, but just in moderation. I probably eat chocolate every day of my life, but not a lot. I might have 1-2 chocolates a day. That's it. You know, it's maybe 15 gram, 20 gram a day. That's it. I don't sit there and go eat copious amounts of chocolate, because it is, you know, it is not a meal replacement. It is still an indulgence. So I think the sugar tax, is just highlighting to people what they should be eating, what they should be, you know, what they actually should be buying. So I don't think sugar tax on chocolate is not there yet. I think it's just on soft drinks now, but you know, it's possible that it obviously in time will come, but I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing for the whole chocolate industry. That's my view.